In this Mentoring Moment series, we continue with the theme of YOUnique. You are unique. You're a one-of-a-kind masterpiece made by God on purpose for a purpose. And we want to live into who we are and what God has called us to do, because when those two things combine, it's powerful. There's a couple traps along the way. I just talked about the trap that is comparison. Another trap I want to talk about is the fact that sometimes we can think about life in terms of wins or losses. I'm a competitive guy. I've played a lot of sports from the beginning until now. And what I know about sports is there's a winner and there's a loser. And it's if you're competitive, like a lot of leaders are, you want to win, right? But in life, that can actually be a challenge, especially if you're a leader of a church or a leader of a ministry. Whether you're male or female, there's a definite feeling that we need to win. What I want to talk about in this short 5-minute burst is that maybe a better way to look at life is to say that every single experience is an opportunity to grow, whether it looks like a win or whether it looks like a loss. For example, in a win, you might actually build your confidence. So you think, that's cool, like I can do this, and we need those kinds of experiences. But when something doesn't quite go the way that we wanted it to go, it could look like a loss. And then maybe we feel like, oh, I failed. And so we're evaluating win, loss, and it's very easy when you're leading people and you're not in control of the outcomes from a lot of the decisions people make to feel like we're losing. If our attendance doesn't grow, or if our giving is down, or if there's a family that leaves the church, or if there's a friend who leaves the church, that's even harder. And so it's very possible to be evaluating like a win or a loss. And I'd like us to think more about the fact that we can grow through every situation of our life. I'll tell you a story from my own life. For some reason, and maybe it's this competitive streak that I have, that I had the idea that if I'm doing God's will and I'm doing the best that I can do and I'm fulfilling the calling for my life, that the growth curve of my life should be up and to the right, like a 45-degree angle up and to the right. And all of us know that that's just not reality, right? What I learned is life is much more like a series of stair steps. So let's say that you take a step of faith and you begin to do ministry. Like my first calling was to be a youth pastor. For about 3 years, I was learning that calling. I took a big step up, but it wasn't like this. It was more like after the first year or so, I kind of knew what to do. And then the next year was more like a plateau. Like I was learning, I was growing. Things were going well in some ways. Things were challenging in other ways. But I think the point wasn't like, am I always growing up into the right? I think the point was, am I learning? Am I becoming? In fact, I began to understand that my calling really is to be more like Jesus. Like every day, my calling is to be more like Jesus. This life is a series of activities and even tests, if you will, to develop character and to develop us into the person of Jesus. When we get done with the end of our life, we'll leave every accomplishment here. But the thing that we'll take with us into eternity is, did we become more like Jesus? So I had this step up, kind of a plateau. Then God called us to be senior pastors. We took another step up. The church didn't take off and do this like I was hoping, but we were growing, we were changing, we were becoming. There was a bit of a plateau. And then God called us to plant a church, another step up. And then the church didn't just take off. There was another kind of a plateau there. And I would encourage you to take some time in maybe one of your quiet times and pull out a piece of paper and begin to draw a diagram of the growth of your life. And I'm not talking about accomplishments here or things that we might say wins, or even losses, but take a look at how you grow and develop as a person. Like in this particular stage of your life, did you grow maybe in humility? That's a hard one, not always a fun one. Did you grow over here in a sense of being more of a giver than a taker? Over here when you made this step, maybe this step up when you began to plant a church, what were the things you learned from here? We learned in our marriage, if you want to think about family for a second, that about the time that we got figured out what it was like to be husband and wife, and we took this step up. Then we had kids. It was a challenge for a bit. And then once we began to kind of get a hold of that, the kids started to go to school, and that was another challenge. And so life is a bunch of stair steps, if you will. And so I'll leave you with this. Would you be able and willing to start evaluating your life, not by whether there are wins or losses in your perception or in others, but by the fact that in every situation, hard or good, you can grow. In every situation, people could see Christ in you. So maybe you're going through something that right now you're not loving it. But the reality is that situation may allow people to see Christ in you in a different way than they would if everything was up and to the right. It's easy to be on top of things when things are good. When things are challenging, often that's when your true character shows up, and that's when you need Christ, and that's when he can shine through you. So I want to encourage you, think less about wins or losses, and think more about the fact that in every experience you can grow and you can become more like Jesus. And I think if you're on that path, then you're going to be able to handle whatever comes in your life.